Hello everyone, welcome to Saylor's Creek Battlefield Historical State Park. This is the site of the last major fight of the war in Virginia. It takes place on April 6, 1865, and it's just 3 days before the surrender at Appomattox. My name is Ranger Lee Wilcox, and today's program focuses on odd spellings and common mispronunciations as related to the Civil War. Now, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with the spellings or the pronunciation, it's just a sign of the times and how the English language evolves over time. You could go back to the 1600s, and words that were used during that period were spelled differently and sounded differently compared to those same words today. It's still the English language, it just changes over time. And so we're focusing on how much has changed in just 150 years dating back to the Civil War on this program. And what we're talking about are the last names of individuals as well as place locations and military terms. So let's get started. The first person that we're going to look at is this fellow. Now, by today's standards, his last name looks like you'd pronounce it as Heth, H-E-T-H, Henry Heth. But in reality, it was pronounced Heath during the Civil War. So this is really Henry Heath. Then we have this individual. Today, it looks like he pronounced his name Patrick Cleburne, but during the war, it was pronounced Claiborne. So really, it's Patrick Claiborne. Next up is this fellow. I've seen this last name pronounced two different ways modern times. One version is Taliaferro, another one is Taliaferro. But this fellow, during the Civil War, his last name, believe it or not, was actually pronounced Tolliver. So this is William Tolliver. Then we have Louis Armistead. Now, historians today still pronounce his last name as Armistead, and it's generally accepted as Armistead. But in reality, during the Civil War, this was a strange one. His last name was pronounced Umstead. So this is really Louis Umstead. Next up is George Armstrong Custer. Now, there's nothing wrong with the way you pronounce his last name, Custer. The reason I put this one in is to let you know that he comes from German immigrants. His ancestors immigrated to the United States from Germany, and when they first arrived here, his last name was spelled with the letter K originally. Over the generations, the K was replaced with a C. It's still pronounced the same way, Custer. It's just been, I guess you could say, Americanized, and so we know it today as Custer with a C. Then we have this fellow with a very unique last name. It looks like Richard Ewell, if we were to read it as by today's standards. But it was pronounced two different ways during the Civil War. One had two syllables, the other version had one syllable. And so these are the two examples. The first one, it sounds like combining the words you and will together and saying it quickly. So Ewell, Richard Ewell. That's one correct way of pronouncing it. Another one is to speed it up a little bit. So it sounds like it's just one syllable. And that's Yule, so Richard Yule, from Christmas time, the Yule log. So Richard Yule or Richard Yule is correct. Then we have this fellow. Looks like it's Alfred Wad. It's kind of a tongue twister there. But it's actually pronounced Wode, believe it or not. Like you're riding a horse and it gets away from you and you have to wode that horse down. So Alfred Wode, he's a famous sketch artist from the Civil War. He travels with the Federal Army and he's witness to numerous battles throughout Virginia. He's got such a talent with the pencil and paper that he makes photographers jealous. An example of his work is this one here. He was actually here during the battles of Saylor's Creek and witnessed the fighting unfold. And in this sketch, he has scribbled down the Confederates as they are surrendering here at Saylor's Creek. In this sketch, you have soldiers with the Confederate battle flag turned sideways, the butts of the muskets held aloft in the air. That was an indication of soldiers surrendering at that time if they didn't have the white flag with them. Also in this image, you can see the wagons on the road. There's also a caisson with a limber chest. There's some casualties spread about, but a very graphic picture. And if you get a chance, do an internet search on Alfred Wode, and you'll see the hundreds of images that he did of various battles throughout Virginia, and they just have incredible detail. This next one is a military term, and it's often mispronounced. I'm guilty of it myself. but it's referring to horse soldiers. The correct version or way to pronounce it is the top version, which is cavalry, with the C-A-V-A-L-R-Y, where the L is towards the end of the word, cavalry. It's often mispronounced, though, as Calvary, where the L is up towards the front. But Calvary is actually a site outside of Jerusalem that's commonly accepted as where Christ was crucified, and you'll see a lot of churches with that name, Calvary. So to distinguish the two different versions, the correct way to pronounce the word for horse soldiers is cavalry. Did I just do it again? Cavalry, with the L towards the end, and cavalry is something entirely different. Next up are 4 different spellings for Saylor's Creek. That is the most common question that we get here at the battlefield almost on a daily basis. These are 4 different versions I've seen and heard over time that I've been here. But there's only one correct spelling that we go by, and that is this one. So this is Saylor's Creek Battlefield Historical State Park. The reason we spell it this way, like a naval shipman, S-A-I-L-O-R''S, is based off of a map that we located and during our research of this area, trying to find the correct spelling. It dates back to the mid-1700s when we're still an English colony, and there's a group of British explorers that venture out into the wilds of Virginia to map the region. What's still a mystery is we do not know why they chose the word Saylor for this location and for the creek itself. We're not sure if it was a group of sailors that were exploring this area or if the leader of the expedition's last name may have been Saylor. Nevertheless, that's how it shows up on the oldest piece of information we found. Like I said, it was a map from the 1700s, and it's spelled this way. You get to the Civil War, and after-action reports, the official records from the war, letters written home, diary entries, all spell it this way, S-A-I-L-O-R''S. It's not until the late 1800s that the alternate spelling shows up, S-A-Y-L-E-R-S, the second most commonly used spelling. And we're not sure why it got changed that way. All we do know is that during the late 1800s, right at the turn of the century, Washington, D.C. sent out agents into the field to map the known United States at that time. And as the agents came through this area, they chose to spell it phonetically. Now, we don't know if that was just laziness on their part or maybe it had something to do with illiteracy at that time. But when they were told by locals that this was known as Saylor's Creek in the Saylor's Creek Valley, they recorded it as S-A-Y-L-E-R-S, and it remained that way for almost 100 years until we were able to correct the record after doing some extensive research. So again, the correct spelling is S-A-I-L-O-R''S, like the naval shipman, Saylor's Creek Battlefield Historical State Park. So this brings us to the end of our program. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning in. We do have some more programs planned for you, but we also have several colleagues at the other state parks that are putting out programs. We hope you're enjoying them. Give us feedback. Let us know if you like this type of format, if we should keep doing it, and how much you enjoy it. Thanks, and see you next time.